Evolutionary.org, episode 606, coming your way. 2024 updated Testolone RAD-140. SARMS Revisited. We're going to give you the up-to-date information on RAD. And RAD, one of the first SARMs I ever used. I believe it's maybe the second or third SARM I ever used. The first one was LGD. I think the second one was GW, which is not really a SARM, but it's sold as a SARM. And then really, so the second one that was actually a SARM that I ever used is RAD-140. This one's been around a while among gym rat bodybuilding circles along with LGD. And and at the time it was considered, hey, this is a new SARM. Today it's been around a long time, so definitely not a new SARM in 2024, but 10-15 years ago, of course, it was. So it is a pure SARM, selective androgen receptor modulator. And right off the bat, you're looking at advantage. It's going to give you a lot of the benefits that you would get off anabolic steroids without the side effects. And that's why a lot of people like to go for SARMs. If you're in your early 20s, it's perfect because you don't want to open that can of worms at a really young age. You don't want to start messing with your reproductive system, your fertility, your pituitary glands, your Leydig cells. You don't want to shrink your balls. You don't want to cause your prostate to start getting hit. So SARMs is a good option. And SARMs is also a good option as you get older. If you want to do something more mild with less side effects, that's going to have less effects on things like your blood pressure and your heart health and being shut down and your kidneys and your liver and all this other stuff. So SARMs is a good option because it hits everything much, much less than anabolic steroids. Does it give you as good a results as anabolic steroids? No. In most cases, it does not, but it can give you good results regardless. That will be very comparable to a lot of steroid cycles and much, much more better than using, say, natural supplements or something like creatine or whey protein powder or something like that. So a lot of people will go with SARMs for that reason. So let's talk a little bit about it. So historically, 2010 was when it was first published. Investigations made on RAD-140. They started coming up, and it was developed by a company called Radius Health. And one of the first studies that they looked at was done on animals, unfortunately, which I don't like to hear, but that's the reality of the medical community, and that's how they test, unfortunately.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Half of the course, Steve.
And then it was proven that RAD-140 has a unique property of countering the prostate enlargement caused by testosterone use. Yep. So this is why a lot of people will like to use it with steroids, because it can counteract some of those prostate effects, according to those studies. Now, in real life, does it really make a difference? Not really, because you're still, if you're going to run anabolic steroids, like if let's say you're going to run TRT, right? And you're going to do sports TRT, you're going to run at 200, 300 milligrams a week for life. You can't sit here and tell me, yeah, I'm going to stack in LGD and that's going to offset the prostate effects or the other effects from anabolic steroids. So this is why we're doing this podcast, to update you guys. And a lot of people have said this sort of thing on the forum, and it's just not true. We're not here to sugarcoat things. We're not here to bullshit you, and tell you that, this can do this. Just because some study 15 years ago showed that to be promised doesn't mean in reality that's the case. If it was the case and everybody would be taking LGD, every doctor in the world prescribing TRT would be giving their patients LGD. So that's one of those examples where it doesn't really translate to real life. Go ahead, Mom.
Let me jump in for a second here, Steve. I'll tell you what happens, right? And again, me and Steve have probably been guilty of this in the past. If you focus on one aspect, you're ignoring all the other aspects. This is like a member of the forums comes on, doesn't want to train, doesn't want to eat clean, but drinks beer and says, if I cut back on one thing in my life, beer, will I get great chest muscles? Will my biceps start popping? No, motherfucker, you still got to go to the gym. You still got to train. You still got to eat clean. You got to train your motherfucking ass off. You got to train your whole body and then focus on your arms. So the idea that something is prostate healthy, great. But as Steve said, it will not be something that is used for specific prostate treatment over and above you using testosterone, even at TRT levels, like Steve says, you still need to do the other healthy shit. So I get it, right? And supplement companies are terrible with this, Steve. Not necessarily. Ironically, the SARMS companies are great because they've got all these other SARMs they're going to tell you about. But what a lot of supplement companies do will put something on the front of a magazine when they used to do the magazines. It'll be front and center, or even on the side of the fucking tub. It'll say X ingredient has been shown in studies to do X, Y, or Z. But they don't tell you that they're not using an effective dose, and they're not telling you what happens with the combination of the other ingredients, and they're not telling you that the people in the study were made to diet. They're not telling you that the people in the study were students, and so on and so forth, right? So, students at university get paid $30 a day or whatever, and there are people that have never trained before, and of course, not training, and then suddenly hitting the gym is going to make a huge fucking difference. So you'll see things like the average person put on 7 pounds of muscle on this, yeah. But if they've never fucking trained before, I'd put on 5 pounds using fuck all. You need to know this kind of information. This is the stuff that Steve and I do in this podcast. We make sure that you're aware that just because it says it does X, it's the other stuff still needs to be done. This is super, super important. That said, Steve, whether we like it or not, mice, monkeys, rabbits, etc. are used, and it does that because even if we had a computer model that was absolutely amazing for this stuff, and there are computer programs like this, you seem to have something like, for example, in a DNA chain where things are essentially inactive, and unfortunately, it's these quote unquote inactive are things that end up responding to something which we didn't think they would in the computer model, and therefore, I mean, we've had this with human studies when they've gone all over the place, and people have become incredibly ill. So they absolutely end up having to do minimally now compared to before, use mice, use monkeys, and so on and so forth. Something else, Steve, I mean, the thing that specifically stood out for me was, and again, it's still going to be up to the kind of dosages that we'll be talking about, but they found that the muscle gains in the monkeys specifically were dose dependent. In other words, they gained a bit of muscle on 5, but they gained more muscle on 10. Now, how many times have I said, there's a limit beyond which you can't go? There's still a limit beyond which you can't go. There's no point thinking you're going to double it because you've doubled the recommended dose. But nevertheless, when they were doing the studies on these monkeys, they found that the more they gave them, the more muscle they gained. Again, up to a point. And that point will almost certainly be the recommended dosages that we're talking about today. The other thing is, Steve, is, as Steve quite correctly says, this was arguably new back in 2010. I've got to be honest with you, I don't think we've really had a lot more since. We're certainly aware of a lot more, and we certainly become more likely to go out and search to see what the studies are doing. And I touched on a show that we just recorded. There are some amongst us who literally like to read the science, like to read the conclusions and how the study was put together. And there's one or two in our industry, in our family, on the forums, etc., that will occasionally find something that's of interest, that's come up on a Google search, and say, listen, this is a new thing. How does this work? Do you think this guy's would be any good? And occasionally those things become the new PED of tomorrow. So yeah, definitely new in 2010. 14 years later is not new, but I don't think we've had a lot in between, Steve. Back to you for a minute.
So the way they, the dream with RAD-140 was that they wanted it to replace using testosterone in hormone replacement therapy. And testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, is what's used in like 95 to 99% of situations. For those of you out there, mostly men, but also some women who do go on testosterone replacement therapy or hormone replacement therapy for the rest of your life. So the idea was, let's produce something that doctors could prescribe to people that would replace testosterone in hormone replacement therapy, and that would produce less side effects, specifically on the prostate. So the idea there was great, but in reality, what you get on paper in the case of RAD is you're going to get, if we're going to take testosterone and call it 100 to 100 ratio anabolic androgenic, with RAD on paper, it's 90 to 1. So you're not getting those androgenic effects on paper. And in real life, you're not going to get those androgenic effects. And in real life, you're not going to get close to the anabolic effect of testosterone. So what happens is, a lot of people, you'll try to use RAD for TRT, and it's just not going to be the same as using testosterone. So that idea has fallen by the wayside. And look, we could say, 15 years later, how many clinics, anti-aging clinics, do you walk in and they're like, yeah, we're going to give you RAD because it was never approved, for that purpose. So obviously we're not going to do it. But even if they had access to RAD, how many people out there, regardless, who buy their stuff on the black market underground, are actually jumping at the chance to get RAD to use it for HRT? And it just never came to fruition the way they had hoped. But it was a good try. It was a good try.
Yeah, let me
So
talk on that.
so in the end, we're using RAD for the purpose similar to why we use LGD, to lean muscle mass, strength, and we're gonna talk about some of the stacks that you can stack RAD with other SARMs and also with anabolic steroids. But we use it for that purpose, just like these other SARMs that never came to fruition either. Go ahead, and we'll talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is when we talk about updated, Steve. This is specifically springs out to me. So I wrote down old man stack, and you know why? That's just because there was three reasons, and I can 100% see why people thought this might be an effective replacement for using testosterone in TRT. Enhances the brain, the neuro parts of us, and I can't even remember the correct word, but essentially your brain's ability to do what it does. And as you get older, your brain slows down. I do a joke for myself, Steve, at 59, going, I can remember what happened in 1973, but I can't tell you what I had for breakfast 4 days ago. That's just the old man shit. You start talking about stuff you've done in 1973 versus yesterday, and so on and so forth. But basically, your brain works better. It enhances the nerve firing, right? Then you've got muscle. Specifically, you get old, muscle wasting. So it's enhancing the idea that it was going to slow down muscle wasting or even put some additional muscle back on, which is great. So you would start to feel out again and look and feel perhaps 45 instead of 40, this kind of stuff. And then the last one, again, is that enhancement of prostate health, right? But the reality of the situation is, and I wrote down androgenic as the other comment, right? So when we talk about TRT, we're not just talking about necessarily retention of muscle tissue or even new muscle tissue. We're not necessarily talking about the impact on your prostate, which there will be, especially at the higher dosages for TRT. Sports TRT can be as high as 400 milligrams. That's really cruising. It's not, I don't think of that as sports TRT. I would agree with Steve at 200 to 300 milligram level. But the other effects, and for those of you that I'm going to call low T or with a low affinity for testosterone, the difference can be night and fucking day. And unfortunately, we're not talking about here that when we talk about RAD-140. What we're looking at here is you don't get that boost in feeling manly. And I don't just mean deeper voice, more muscles, stronger in the gym or whatever else. Literally, the difference between men and women, that the men are far more likely to be risk takers. You're far more likely to be out there shouting at the troops or your sales team or as a politician driving the crowd or whatever else. And the number of people that are in those situations that have enhanced their quote unquote ability to do those things with a little bit of TRT is surprising. Going back and be a little bit more dominant in the bedroom or whatever else. And RAD-140 is definitely, and I'll touch on something I just said in the last show, Steve, when I was talking about LGD and RAD-140, and I said, my buddy has just tried RAD-140. He says his muscles felt harder in days. He says it's supposed to kick in 48, 72 hours. He felt like 24, 36 hours. He could feel a difference. This is a guy that's used steroids for years on and off, has gone as far as using growth hormone and other bits and pieces. And these two absolutely stood out for him. And I told him, I said, when you're telling me that you feel like this and you have noticed this difference that quickly, as someone who's used multiple steroids over multiple cycles of a period of some years, I'm going to pay interest right to the point where, and I said to Steve, I was going to talk about this. I've literally just started, I think late last week, when the products turned up, I started using RAD-140. And what did I say to Steve in the pre-show? Today, I did a PB at 59 years of age where I doubled, and I think I could have tripled it, Steve, and even gone for the actual big number that I wanted. I did 2 reps on the Hatfield squat with 748 pounds, and all I'm running is MK677, which I've been running for months. And I started RAD-140 late last week. So yeah, I felt like I could have done the 365, which is 803 pounds, which is my intended target, and that felt like it could have been done today. So that's a fucking recommendation for my old ass right there. So yeah, I mean, again, this is one of those things where what could have been as a TRT isn't, and that is definitely an update because the science seemed to suggest it, but the practical experience is not. And even if it did have some of those facets, it doesn't seem to have that quote unquote manly go out and grab the world by the throat, go out and parachute out of a fucking airplane, risk taking motherfucker kind of stuff that some of the higher dosages have on some people with a low affinity for testosterone when they go on the TRT. The people that are suffering with depression, stress, divorces, mortgages, and whatever else. And they said for some of them, Steve, as you know, we've seen this quoted, that their lives have changed, that testosterone is a miracle drug for them people. Unfortunately, as fantastic, and I'm going to say that word, RAD-140 does seem to be, it doesn't change that additional aspect. And that is a big deal for a lot of people. And precisely for that, what looked like it was going to be the be-all and end-all wasn't. And that's precisely why you do not. This is not a money thing. The clinics could easily charge more if it costs more or charge less if it costs less. It's not a money thing, absolutely. They're still making the same fucking money they made just then and the day before. But you are not seeing RAD-140 as a TRT replacement. The other one, of course, would be, Steve, as the male contraceptive. And again, we still haven't sort of hammered that one down, and they've been trying to do that one for 40 or 50 years. Back to you.
So let's go over how to use it and how to dose it and how to stack it and all that fun stuff. And look, at the end of the day, with RAD, there's different ways that guys prefer to use it. And so originally, I can remember the first time I used RAD, I used 20 milligrams. And now we're seeing sources and brands kind of pushing it a little higher to 30 milligrams. So there's no reason to be alarmed by it. Something like S4, it's 50 milligrams. And, other things like Ulsterine used to be 25 and now it's 50. So, 30 milligrams to 20 milligrams, look, somewhere in there. That's been the dosage. I think if you're using it by itself, 8 to 12 weeks, 30 milligrams a day would be ideal. Now, if you're stacking it, you could go a little less. So let's talk about a little bit of the stacks that RAD is really popularly used by. And the first one is the advanced strength stack. And this involves a couple peptides as well. So GHRP6, GHRP2, these are growth hormone releasing peptides that are included. And then you've got LGD, you've got S4, you've got S23, which is a very powerful SARM, and then you've got RAD. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different compounds, 4 SARMs and 2 peptides in this advanced strength stack. So this will be a good one versus going and using, let's say, Dianabol and testosterone, or using Deca and testosterone, or Sustanon, mixing up a lot of these types of compounds, or even using Tren. So you get much less side effects this way. You don't have to worry about gyno. You don't have to worry about bloating up like a fish. You don't have to worry about blood pressure skyrocketing, getting insomnia, all these other side effects, night sweats, and all this other crap that you get from some of these anabolic steroids. So this would be a stack for you if you really want to take the advanced route when it comes to strength. Feel free to jump in, Mobster, if you want to touch on any of these. You want to talk Chin?
I'm just looking at cost effectiveness here, Steve. And one of the things that springs to mind, peptides, for example, well, they are definitely cheaper than they was before. That strength stack could be expensive. I'll just give you an example again. I'm looking at one of our approved sellers here right now and looking at the lean mass product that they produce, RAD-140, and a month supply is about $50, which, guys, if you think about its cost effectiveness, et cetera, is absolutely amazing. So, and that would just be as a lean mass product. You could obviously add that, even if you're looking at one of the other SARMs, and combine that for a strength stack, and you'd only be looking at $100 for about 4 weeks, Steve, which is amazing. But again, you're holding this stuff up. Peptides, for example, were quite serious in that particular regards, versus, for example, running anabolic steroids and peptides. That'd be way more expensive. So again, this is something that appeals to the younger guys. Certainly in terms of their disposable income. Us older motherfuckers tend to have more money. It's as simple as that. If you've got a good job, fill your boots, guys. So yeah, this is for me, it's a cost versus effectiveness ratio. Peptides, again, I think the only other issue for me would be peptides, Stephen. This is just me, as they typically require more pinning, because a lot of the time you're talking about shorter half-lives. So for example, again, RAD-140, you can take it once a day. I'm running at 20 milligrams. in the morning. And again, I train specifically for strength, so I can see me being very interested in some of the strength stacks that Steve's talked about. And again, I'm just not someone who's super keen on pinning. I said another thing as well, Steve, that a lot of the earlier formulas, and again, we're talking about an updated RAD-140 podcast today. A lot of the original formulations came, or the original SARMs that were available to you were in liquid form with a dropper. And there's a lot more companies that are doing gels, pill form, and so on and so forth. So, for example, and it still applies, if some of you are old school and you want to use the liquid approach with the dropper, can taste quite horrible, regardless of the SARM. It doesn't just apply to 140. It's literally because of the solution that they're suspended in. And Steve constantly said this on the forums: chase it down with some grapefruit juice or orange juice, or even some dilute sugar-free squash. Literally have one, get it down your neck, the droppers, and then straight away hit the thing. Because honestly, I'm old school again, Steve. I'm like, if cod liver oil is good for you, just fucking nick it, you bastards. I don't care about the taste. But the reality is you're going to be doing this on a regular, every single day. And in the case of a couple of these products, more than once a day. So anything that helps it go down and makes you stick to the stack, there's definitely got to be a way to go. Yeah, like I said, Steve, peptides-wise, RAD-140 is actually really, really cheap for what it is. And for a month's supply, this is fabulous. Just looking at this, this is atypical for across our approved sources and sites that we recommend. The only issue for me would be the additional cost of the peptides, and it comes down to whether I thought that I was going to see additional benefits. But sometimes what we're looking at is, Steve, when we talk about healing stacks and strength, is that when we're pushing the strength stuff, we're also pushing the injury risk. So we want to make sure that our tendons are strong, our fascias and connective tissues are strong. And sometimes that's what we're looking at here. Products that are combined together to enhance our overall strength while maintaining tissue health at the same time. Back to you for another stack.
All right, so the next one we're going to talk about is a simple bulking stack, and this is LGD, S23, and RAD. And really, LGD and RAD together has been probably the most popular one that I've seen. And it's really been a really good one. And if you want to really add some punch to it, S23 is a punch. So I'd say if you're in your early 20s, don't run the S23 with this. Just do the LGD and RAD. If you are over 25, then go ahead and run the S23. Although that is debatable. A lot of people say, well, what does it matter? I mean, if you're early 20s.
I think the bottom line there, Steve, the key word there would be suppression. And we try to encourage the younger users to not fuck around with the fertility, even though they don't seem to sometimes care. And quite simply, it's a combination of side effects and a much greater likelihood, because that's the key word, I think, here, of an issue with fertility, which we listen, we're talking about performance enhancing drugs here, guys. We're not fucking around. We're talking about doing things to your body that wouldn't naturally happen. It's quite simple. But at the same time, as best we possibly can, we try to encourage sensible behavior. I'm not going to say safe behavior, because I don't think that really applies here. If I'm using testosterone, if I'm using a SARM, I'm unnatural. I'm not a natty. And therefore, the issues are that I might have some side effects. And we talk about these. We make sure that you're aware of them. But the S23 here covers a much greater likelihood of an impact on your fertility and or side effects. And so we say, right, this is the reason why we want you to be a certain age, fully physically mature, certainly mentally mature, which you tend to be after 25. I don't give a fuck if you're the age in your country that you're considered an adult. It's 18, 16, 14. I don't care. The reality of that situation is us older motherfuckers know that we think differently when we get older. It just is. And we want you to think about these things. And it's our fucking duty, if you like, as best we possibly can, to talk about responsible shit as best we can, so that you don't come back to us and say, well, motherfuckers tell me about this side effect. No, we tell you everything. And we tell you why. And this is the reason why we have certain age numbers that are limit there. Listen, you can fight a war, you can vote, you can even be a member of your parliament or your Congress or whatever, Steve. But why? Listen, guys, and this is the bottom line. Why fuck about with your prostate? Why fuck about with your testicles if we're saving you from having to worry about those things? And that's what we're doing here. We are still talking about PEDs. We are still talking about enhancement, but we train as best we possibly can to kind of try to get the right kind of advice out there into the world historically. And these most of these podcasts are ahistorical, that we're trying to be timeless. And so our sensible use, health use, likelihood of fertility issues, etc. Listen, fertility is going down in society regardless of issues with testosterone use. steroid use and SARM use. It just is. So what, do we want to speed up that process? No, we do not. And therefore, that's why we give you this kind of advice. Off the soapbox, Stephen, back to you.
All right, so let's go to endurance stack, and this one also includes RAD-140, and this one includes GW and SR, which in their own right are great for endurance just on their own. But if you really want to turbocharge your endurance and you want to get the benefits of more muscle, more recovery, more everything, because there's much more to endurance. If you're going and running 10Ks and half marathons, that's their biggest thing, is recovery and being able to recover from those brutal, but pushing your body beyond what it's capable of doing. To an insane amount. So this is a great one, especially if you're like to do triathlons and you like to do road races and stuff like that. So you do the GW and SR and the RAD, and then you can add CJC, 1295 NODAC, and ipamorelin. So you're adding those two peptides to it. So it's 3 SARMs and 2 peptides. So this is a really nice endurance stack for those of you who want to go down that route. Mobster, you want to touch on that? And we got 2 more to go if you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, very quickly. Look, I've competed in weightlifting and strength competitions, specifically grip. And ironically, if you win a class or place highly in the stage 1 event or whatever else, as often as not, you go first on the next round. So anything that enhances your recovery has to be a fucking bonus, Steve. There's another example again. I was watching Usain Bolt's video on YouTube the other day, and I was questioning how quickly the quarterfinals, semi-finals, and the finals were together, and where you get placed on the track and so on and so forth. And one of the things that they never did is run as fast as they possibly could, i.e. break a world record in the quarters or semis, just enough to win, and then go flat out in the finals. So think about how that works. We learn from high-level athletes, whether that's pro-American football, ice hockey, tennis, whatever, how they play in the early rounds, how quickly the round can come around. Sometimes it's just your name's drawn out of the hat and you've got to go again straight away. So anything that enhances your ability to run at that level again, especially in the shorter distances, Steve, and it could be done the same day. They might have to drop an event because of the weather, whatever. This is for you guys that do athletics at college, high school, county level, state level, national level, international level. Think about how that sometimes happens. Sometimes it's a whole fucking day between events. Sometimes it's literally 2 or 3 events in a day. Sometimes you have got to go next and it's only 15 fucking minutes. So learn from what they do and enhance your ability to recover. And there's definitely, as Steve said already, an aspect to RAD-140 where your ability to recover, especially in the endurance stack, is enhanced. Keep that in mind. Something to learn. That used to.
All right, so a couple more stacks we're gonna talk about here: the Mega Shred / Recomp stack, and this is a good one if you just want to shred and you really got your diet on point. You plan on doing a lot of fasted cardio. This is a good one. So you're combining the GW, YK11, and S4, and then you're adding the RAD-140 to it. So you do S4 50 milligrams, YK11, I'd say about 10 milligrams, maybe 12 milligrams. Then the RAD-140, 20 to 30 milligrams, and then the GW, 20 milligrams. And this would be a really good Mega Shred Recomp stack. It's a good one. It's definitely a good one. And I've run a stack similar to this. It really works out good. And you've got just the regular old Recomp stack, and it's RAD, S4, and YK11. So it's just 3 SARMs and same dosing. YK11, 10 to 12 milligrams a day, S4, 50 milligrams a day, and then the RAD, 20 to 30 milligrams a day. So that's a really good option too. So RAD is very versatile. You can use it from anything from really good with endurance stacked to recomp stacked. So I have a lot of respect to it. You can also bulk with it. So really you can do everything. Just depends on how you decide to go ahead and stack it. Mobster?
Yeah, something else before we finish, guys, and this actually occurs to me as well as we've been running this show and the previous SARMs that we just talked about. The prices have come down, Steve. That's definitely an update. The prices that you were paying 10 years ago, 15 years ago, in the case of 1 or 2 versus now, are better. There's more companies producing it. The companies that are producing the raw material have brought down the price for manufacturing purposes by the labs. And the prices that are available in a much more competitive market than there used to be. There used to be a very small selection of companies that were producing these products, and those number of companies has gone up certainly much bigger ranges or availability of SARMS across the again on lab stores, on approved sources, sites, etc., etc. It used to be that it was only 3 or 4, and now there's 10 or 15. Lots of companies have enhanced that side of their business when they were concentrating on anabolic steroids. And literally, and I looked at this just now, Steve, I haven't got a way to go back and look at the prices, but just from memory, I seem to recall that the liquid forms could be quite expensive back in the day, and now we've got availability of liquid forms, gel forms, and pill forms, and the price for any of those forms right across the thing seems to be stayed the same, which means they've gone down effectively or literally gone down versus, and I'm just thinking, Steve, off the top of my head, and guys, I'll be happy to be corrected in the comments and on the forums, you're looking at $60 to $80 for 4 weeks supply of certain products, sometimes more, $100. And in a couple of examples, you're looking at $50. That's fucking half price compared to just 5, 6, 7 years ago, never mind 10, 15 years ago. And availability, there's in the British UK beef magazine, Steve, because we have a different legal setup, I've seen photographs. One particular company springs to mind where they have a chiller cabinet full of SARMS, top to bottom. It looks like a lab. And there's hundreds and hundreds of these bottles in there. And people barely knew about them 5 or 10 years ago here in the UK. And now every motherfucker knows about them. When you can have a full page, double page, in fact, advert in a British bodybuilding magazine that still exists. And it's got chiller cabinets full of the products. And ironically, normally we have cheaper steroids here in the UK than you do in the States for one reason or another. It's the other way around. That's for some reason slightly more expensive than the American market. It should actually be the cheapest in America because you have the biggest market. So an updated part of that would be that prices, cost effectiveness, etc., that I've touched upon earlier on, has definitely improved right the way across all of the SARMS, not just RAD-140, as we're talking about today. So there's definitely a thing there. Listen, guys, Steve's touched upon this already, where you've got multiple stacks that you can do, greater availability, easier to put together from one source, never mind multiple sources, which was another issue before, Steve. Let me touch upon that just now. It used to be the case that you could only get 1 or 2 SARMS from this source and only 1 or 2 SARMS from that source. Then we had SARMS companies come out and just specifically focused. Now you can get it all in one place, and that's across multiple sources. So have a think on that. And again, I'm running this right now. My buddy absolutely fucking loves it. Let me know what you think on RAD-140. What's your experience? What doses do you run it? Is there anything you disagree on? Am I right about the price improvement? Let us know. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It's our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast of informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.